AI is the worst today that it ever will be. Tomorrow it will be better. It continues to better. So looking forward to the future and getting things in place now for when we're at this brand new shiny ball that everybody wants, I think it's going to be for all the success of the future when AI is really at its best. These foundational pieces today, I think, are going to be super important.
Welcome to This is Digital, a podcast brought to you by West Monroe. Join us as we talk to leading experts about bringing the digital mindset to your organization.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to This is Digital, a podcast where we break down the latest digital trends and share tips on how you and your company can be digital. I'm your host, Rissa Reddan, Partner and Chief Marketing Officer at West Monroe. At West Monroe, we help businesses be digital, but what does that mean, and how do you define digital? At its core, digital is a connected mindset and way of working across all aspects of your business. Our team knows that digital can be interpreted in so many different ways, and that's why as you listen to This is Digital, you hear different definitions of what digital means to us and to our guests. Today's episode is a special one as I'm joined by my colleagues, Eric Brown, Eric Johnson, and Ryan Elmore, who lead our new mini-series, This is AI, a video mini-series where they delve into the realm of AI and unravel real-world examples and use cases. So please be sure to check it out. This is our first crossover episode here at West Monroe. I did do a little bit of research with Rotten Tomatoes on crossover episodes, and I was surprised that the Law & Order franchise did not make the list, but some of the other Dick Wolf shows in fact did. But I'm happy to serve as your Detective Olivia Benson and dive right in. So I'm excited to hear about your expertise on AI and discuss how AI can be used, especially in marketing. That certainly holds a place that's near and dear to my heart. To begin, why don't you all share a quick introduction of yourselves and what This is AI is about? Eric, would you like to lead off? Eric Brown?
Sure, I can do that. My name is Eric Brown. I am a senior partner in our product experience and engineering lab, and have been fortunate enough to be involved with our firm-wide AI lab over the last year, as Rissa mentioned, part of the This is AI miniseries.
Awesome. Ryan?
Yep. Ryan Elmore, Innovation Fellow at West Monroe. I think you're going to hear a revolving theme. We're all part of the AI lab. So spoiler alert, been there since the intro of that. Been pretty much on an airplane for the last 9 months talking about AI, meeting with tons of people across the entire US. So lots of cool experiences. Hopefully we'll share.
Hi, I'm Eric Johnson, also known as EJ. I'm a director in our product experience and engineering lab. My main focus has been on digital product strategy and helping clients kind of bring transformative digital products to life. And as Ryan said, part of the AI lab here at West Monroe, focused right now primarily on helping lead some of our Gen AI engagements with active clients.
And could you tell us a little bit about what This is AI is all about and what you've enjoyed the most about it? Who wants to go first? EJ?
Yeah, happy to. So This is AI is a podcast mini-series where we focus on not just the category of artificial intelligence, but the subcategory of generative AI and some of the other components in there, data science, machine learning, to try and help our listeners understand kind of the scope and breadth of generative AI, why it's not necessarily new on the scene, but why we're hearing a lot about it right now and some of the latest evolution. We also talk about how to make it applicable in your business, what to do from an investment portfolio perspective as you discover new and emerging technologies like generative AI, and then how to unlock some of the potential. We also got the opportunity to showcase some really cool stuff that we built and some ways that we use generative AI internally. And finally, we do help highlight some of the risks and some of the great opportunities to incorporate generative AI into our business. Brownie or Ryan, anything that I missed there?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the best bits of feedback, and I literally just got this right before we started recording this podcast. We had a prospective client reach out who had listened to the miniseries and loved the format. And that's really what we wanted to focus on. She mentioned you moved in kind of small chunks of content with practical examples. And that really helped me understand. I'm new to this AI thing, and I was really able to understand Gen AI versus traditional AI, what prompt engineering was in small, really practical chunks. So that was the goal. And so far, we're hearing good feedback on that.
Well, and Eric, to follow up on that, I'd be curious to hear more. When your client mentioned practical, what does that mean? Is it because it's easy to understand? Is it because it's easy to do it? I mean, when practical is being used, what is meant by that?
That's a good question. I mean, she specifically mentioned a lot of people just talking about AI and getting caught up in the buzz, right? There's been so much buzz around it. And she said one of the more pragmatic approaches to what we did that she appreciated was just talking about starting with the use case first, the need. How do we look at value? And then let's figure out what AI can offer given that use case, given that business need. So it was really kind of turning around from the buzz, starting with the buzz, to figuring out what business problems the buzz is applicable in.
Yeah, throw one add on to that is I think it's one of my favorite quotes from EJ is we not only talked about Gen AI use cases, but just use cases, AI use cases, automation use cases, how to make it part of your entire thing. Because Gen AI doesn't solve all of the problems. It's just one step in the whole cog.
And Ryan, do you have a favorite use case?
Anything that's not the same ones you see on LinkedIn every 3 days. So anything outside, like some of the marketing ones that we particularly have used. We did a POC around basically reverse engineering the use cases that they have used today. So they market with imagery, they have videos, they have a different feel, different sentiment. Is it a dark image? And it's able to reverse engineer those from image to words. And then you're able to apply that to the click-through rates, all of the marketing things that matter. And then you're able to use Gen AI that said, hey, I'm about to market shoes to males between 18 and 24 in this location. What should that image be that sells best to them? So those are one of my favorites that I've seen.
And what I get excited about, it doesn't mean that the stuff that's on LinkedIn and all over the internet all day aren't valuable, right? I mean, we're seeing a lot of value in solutions like Copilot and Code Whisperer generating code within our engineering practice, right? That's great. And generating and drafting emails, that's great. But the exciting use cases are the ones where we incorporate generative AI in the application of an industry relevant or domain specific context. So, we kept giving the examples in the mini series of our coverage oracle that integrates with healthcare payer data to answer really, practical questions, right? That can help a call center. Or in the pharmaceutical space, teaching an AI to learn the vernacular of a pharmaceutical company and help them produce content that takes them weeks and weeks over the course of a year.
And I'd be curious, Eric, to hear more about that from the standpoint of how do you generate use cases? Is it people sitting around a whiteboard with sticky notes, or is it something that comes to you when you're out for a jog? Where do the ideas come from, and how do you determine which are worthy of follow-up?
I think a point that we were making a little bit earlier, we try and ground all our ideation around use cases in general. So we don't kind of early narrow to AI only or Gen AI only. We use kind of the tried and true principle of finding product market fit, which, one major component of that is the jobs to be done of the user, whether that's an internal user, a B2B user, or a customer facing solution. So jobs to be done, the pain points that user is experiencing, and the potential gain opportunities. Those three things come together to help us illuminate use cases. The way that we get after those is we usually do, at least in our accelerator offering, kind of a segmented approach of let's do a little bit of education, depending on where the organization is. They may or may not need it. They might have already dipped their toe into the world of Gen AI or AI as a category. But then let's get into casting a wide net. Let's use that methodology of jobs to be done, pain points, and gain opportunities, and look across the organization for areas that both address those and also tie into company strategy. It's important not to go look for, an AI looking nail with your AI hammer. You should be looking for things that align to organizational strategy. And then we use a rigorous methodology to kind of get from that wide net of ideas down to value-driven use cases that can really benefit the organization. And that could be through a buy, because there's a lot of great tools coming online every day out there, or it could be through a bespoke build where we need to consider private data or a bespoke process where there's an intellectual property.
And EJ, for anybody who's listening and thinking, "Oh, that accelerator sounds fun. I would like to do that." What would be the best way for them to approach you to participate?
You should reach out to West Monroe. We have an entire team set aside to help dig in and figure out what the use cases could look like, how we want to get that structured and set up. But you'll see our contact information in the show notes here. Reach out and let us know that you're looking to explore the world of generative AI. And we'll help figure out kind of where the opportunity is. Is this something where we're helping you do more of a software selection, or let's get into the accelerator, which moves per the name, very quickly, anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, we can get you to something that you can test and put in the hands of real users and understand the value. I'm a big proponent of bet the garden, not the farm. You should be making incremental investments to understand if there's a there in these technologies, so you invest wisely as you escalate forward.
Ryan, you mentioned a marketing use case. Are there some other marketing use cases that come to mind that you think are all marketers should be talking about, thinking about right now?
Yeah, the ones that come to mind, as I mentioned earlier, about not 100% Gen AI, is still this technology we're calling legacy AI, aka machine learning. Stuff we used to do 6 months ago when we're doing clustering, sentiment analysis, profiles, personas, any of those things, that still plays into this Gen AI, right? Being able to create the content specifically for a certain group based on their buying behavior, based on the recommendations of what they should be buying. That's still a play for me. And I think it's kind of being forgotten that there's a shiny new object out there that everybody's really running towards, where it's an incremental on top of the data we're using today. And with respect to that data aspect, part of what EJ was talking about, we've gone through some of these discussions. We've done trust falls. We've done these labs. We've come up with great ideas. And data hygiene gets in the way. So having the data integration, the data accessibility, availability, cleanliness, all of those pieces are also kind of bypassed. Well, can I just drag and drop the data into Gen AI and have it cluster it and cleanse it and clean it for me? Yeah. Maybe in 10 years, but now we still have to do those data hygiene aspects. And a lot of the outcomes we've come to date have been like, hold on, you're not ready yet. We got to do some blocking and tackling before we get to these cool use cases.
Well, I think that you raise a really interesting point around readiness to engage or benefit from AI. Do you think about it in terms of, here are the 5 things that you must have in place in order to drive or derive value from AI? How do you think about that?
Yeah, most discussions I have start with the simple question, define AI. Is it generative AI? Is it machine learning? Is it data science? What subcategory of AI is it? And that really drives a lot of those conversations. When you look at the models behind what generative AI is, it's still a machine learning algorithm. So it's the same fundamentals. It's the same pieces that you need in place to be successful for that. So depending on what strategy you're going after, we still need those fundamentals in place. So strategy, center of excellence, all of those concepts still exist.
Yeah, and that's why we start with the use cases too, Rissa. It's to generate an email, for example, you don't need much in place. Right? You can do that just out of box, right? And a lot of people are doing that already. To generate a document, a proposal outline, don't need much in place, right? To start interacting though with other sources of data, this concept, this RAG concept, retrieval augmented generation, where we're incorporating generative AI or a bot with internal data, then we need to make sure that we have access to the right data. That gets more complex. And then beyond that, if we get into a situation where we're actually using data science and generating a new model, right? Then you might need a data science team in place. So the use case really drives, to Ryan's point, the types of AI and machine learning that need to be involved to solve that use case, and the associated complexity and dependencies to make it successful.
Well, and Eric, it sounds like a little bit of what you're describing is a crawl, walk, run, that there are places to start where it might be a little bit easier before you get into something that's a little bit more complicated. And so what might your advice be for our audience then? What are things that you could be doing today to experiment or dip a toe in, to mix metaphors?
Yeah, I would say, again, we go to start with the use cases, right? Think through all of the scenarios that you see as valuable. What are the things that could be automated within your organization? Workflows, creation of content, analysis of data, even kind of real-time engagement scenarios. Dream anything you want, but break them into use cases and associate a business value with that use case. And then where we usually start is thinking through, okay, well, how do we align bang for the buck? We're never going to tell a client to start with the most complex use case that is going to require them to use, years and years of data to generate a custom machine learning model, right? We're going to start with something that drives a lot of value, but with minimal effort, right? Maybe it's just a simple interaction with OpenAI or building a set of kind of workflow-driven interactions with OpenAI. And then maybe for the second use case, we try something that uses integration with specific data to drive more domain relevant, business relevant value and interaction. Right. So given those use cases and the associated business value and complexity, we can take a much more calculated approach to experimenting with and implementing AI scenarios.
I think one of the cool things with the approach you described too, Brownie, is that you have the opportunity to also establish some fundamental platforms to help onboard people in the organization that maybe aren't fluent in what AI is or what generative AI is, and give them tools with which they can explore that world, learn and understand in a more private, controlled environment rather than public tools, especially if you're talking about leveraging internal organizational data. So there's something to be said about standing up platforms that allow a little bit of familiarization and culture building around the world of AI, while you're also doing some experimentation and testing at the same time. You get kind of upskilling and also investigation of value at the same time.
And EJ, when you use the word platform, what do you mean? It feels like everything's a platform in today's day and age. What do you mean when you use that word?
That's a great point. So what I mean is identifying a foundational or a couple foundational capabilities that you're going to use. So specifically, we've chosen to experiment in one of our platforms is Azure's OpenAI implementation. So that is an environment where you can securely manage access to data and stand up, if you want, a conversational chat experience like a ChatGPT, but for your own internal use. Or you can stand up to Brownie's point, much more bespoke solutions to work with data transformation or content generation. So that Azure OpenAI with a little bit of custom development on top is what I mean by a platform. And there's many others out there. Amazon AWS has their solution. Hugging Face is another great solution with a lot of models for folks to play with. But it's that first kind of entry point into the world of standing up a place where you can interact with these technologies as either an engineer, a data scientist, or a general business person.
And now I add one more extra piece onto that. And it's not only the architectural, the actual nuts and bolts that make it work from a hardware perspective, but also I view the platform as not the things you need to solve a single use case. Right? If you can solve this one thing, you go all in with that. Oh, well, then the next use case, we forgot these 3 data sources. We forgot this package to be able to build on top of it. I guess we do need the API connector for that one. The platform allows you to do all of your use cases in one location. And the power of the cloud usually handles that, but there's a few intricacies to make it more broad past that.
I grew up in technology consulting, and I remember distinctly many conversations around this is not going to be a silver bullet. And it feels a little bit similar to today, where people are looking at generative AI as a silver bullet. How do you help people understand perhaps the limitations, or how do you set expectations around what generative AI can or cannot do for you?
That's a great question, and we run into that all the time. And that's one of the primary things that we do in our accelerator is in that upfront education part is we talk about not only the lineage of generative AI, but the category of AI and why most solutions that companies implement are a mix of tools, because not one tool can do everything. I think, Brownie said earlier, you can't throw all the data at the large language model and have it magically, create the output that you want. You have to create an ecosystem of solutions that work together to do that. So what we try and do is educate people around and organizations around the limitations of generative AI as a subcategory of AI, and then how it as a tool works together with other tools, standard databases, structured query language, data science as a discipline, machine learning models in the background to create a comprehensive solution to deliver the output that you want to derive. If you just want to generate text, there are tools that can do that squarely in the generative AI space. But if you want to differentiate and drive value, chances are you're going to need to integrate with other systems and capabilities along the way.
Rissa, part of the accelerator that we have a series of kind of template use case categories that generative AI is really good at executing. So that becomes a guidance as we walk clients through these different scenarios. It's really good, for example, at generating new content or summarizing existing content. It's getting better at translations from one language to another. But fundamentally, this is a large language model. It's trained on language. and patterns of language that it can contextualize and kind of windows of content. So that's really the scenarios and the categories that we see, which I alluded to. I've had clients say, hey, can I just point all my databases at Gen AI and cleanse data? Like, no, that's a whole other series of work that we should talk about. But it seems so magical when humans are interacting with it using language that they assume that it can do other magical things. And so grounding in these kind of categories of common use cases is important. And then there's certainly offshoots. Machine learning has been used for years for classifying content, right? And while it's good at classifying language, you can send it language and say, hey, is this a happy or a positive or a negative or neutral sentiment? It's actually pretty good at that because it's foundationally based in language. But if you're a physician and want AI to help you look at a number of conditions in a patient and potentially suggest a diagnosis, please do not use an LLM for that, right? That requires a much more specialized model. So I think, starting in that baseline of common categories of use cases is helpful too, just to set the stage.
Yeah, just add one more. I think when you think of the term of artificial intelligence, especially through like a simple task, let's say something as simple as like booking a restaurant for the evening, and how many different sources that it takes for you to accomplish that. Your own personal tastes, your own desires. What do you just had Mexican yesterday, so you can't have tacos 2 nights in a row. The availability of your favorite restaurants, your own calendar. There's a lot of things that go into just simply booking. And yeah, it can create that, hey, what am I hungry for? Here's 3 possible examples, but there's 15 other things that have to go into making is what we kind of take for granted. We can look up on one app, we know in our brain of what our schedule looks like. So that kind of concept of an agent that can know and do and interact with multiple things to do one thing instead of just create marketing. Now I have to do something with that, or write a short story. And now I have to do something with that. So I think that's a misconception of what this new AI term is and how the breadth of it really comes into that full automation spectrum.
Next, I'd like to switch into prompt engineering. I feel like this is a term I had not heard until about a year ago, and prompt engineering is everywhere. Do you believe that prompt engineering is a role or a skill? Who would like to take that one? EJ.
My answer would be yes. It is both a role and a skill, and I'll qualify that a little bit, and please, friends, chime in here. I think that prompt engineering from a generative AI perspective is relatively new. Prompt engineering has been a thing engineers have been doing for a while now, from a machine learning model or other infrastructure perspective or technology perspective. But getting a large language model to output exactly what you want it to, whether it's text, images, or what have you, is absolutely a skill. And there are people who are great at it. There are people who are terrible at it. And it takes a while to learn how to be good, whether you know how to craft a persona for the large language model, how to work the intricacies of an image generation model to solicit the aspect ratio and filter effects you want. These are all high skills to do it really well. I think it's also a role for a lot of organizations because not everybody's going to be great at it, and you can't upskill everybody at the same time. So if you're going to start using some of these technologies with a high level of success, you need someone or a group of people that can focus on executing that work in a highly effective way. But I also believe you need them to start training and upskilling your staff. I firmly believe, I think we mentioned this maybe on the This Is AI podcast, but there was a time where you put like fluent in Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint on your resume. Nobody really does that anymore. I think that there are people putting prompt engineering on their resume, and in the future, that'll just be an expected skill set of most people. You have the skill to interact with AI and large language models. But between now and then, you need somebody doing the work to help upskill your organization.
How should somebody be thinking about whether they hire or train? That I hear you on, it's important to upskill and it's important to train always, but how should somebody be making a decision today if they need to hire for the role or train their people?
I have some thoughts, but I'll open it to Ryan.
I feel like you may not need to upskill the people that you have because a lot of this, you think about how the models are trained. It's trained on human language and a huge corpus of contextual language and basically an entire, for lack of better words, brain dump from the internet. And the way that those words are written is from humans. So I've had the best experience of psychology, sociology, people that are in the human interaction world are the best ways to extract that information back out. When we're writing prompts, we're having conversations with the platform, not really like Google where you ask it a single question and hope for the best. You say, well, I didn't really like it that way. What if you thought about it this way? Or think about it in a different manner, or give it a different tone to consider it. I feel like that sociology and how humans interact in our normal world is how that information should be pulled out anyway. So to me, I don't think training a technologist that knows code, knows Python, isn't the best way to go after it. To me, it's the human people.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be a little bit of both, right? I mean, you're going to have people that have the propensity to build that skill and the approach to do it effectively. But the incremental benefit you're going to get by hiring someone externally right now is limited, right? It's not like you have anyone with 5 years of prompt engineering experience, unless they've been doing research with a lot of the companies building the LLMs. I think that will evolve over time. But I love DJ's analogy too. It's if you're in financial analysis, for example, or you're hiring someone into being a financial analyst or a CFO, you're going to have expectation. They have pretty deep abilities in Excel and spreadsheets and financial modeling, right? All of us can use Excel to some extent, but you're going to have an expectation for how they can dig in. Where over time, you're going to have an expectation for how an individual can automate using AI or effectively partner with that AI and configure it to execute a certain type of job. That's going to evolve greatly over the next few years.
And hypothetically, so say you are hiring for a prompt engineer and you're looking for that pool of prompt engineers that does not exist, but what would you be looking for? What would stand out to you on a job description that would tell you that somebody would be well suited to a prompt engineering role?
So if you look at the episode, I think it's the third episode where we get into prompt engineering a little bit. And going to what EJ said, a lot of this is getting creative with how you converse with the bot, right? What kind of setup you tell it to act as a certain persona. So that creativity and comfort in interacting with a bot or any sort of AI technology to experiment with different output, right? Is going to be important. So you're going to be looking for folks that are very creative in their approach to interacting with technology. There's a lot of gray area here. There's a lot of trial and error to figure out what types of context that you can give an AI to get a better output. So really, I think, that positive attitude and that creativity is going to be a big part of any prompt engineering role.
Great. Anything else, Ryan or EJ, on prompt engineering?
Yeah, I would say somebody who, to everything that Brownie said, I would add someone who is actively exploring all the different tools, and not all of them because there's so many, but a good swath of them. They should be fluent in how ChatGPT works, how Anthropic's Claude works, how Bard works, how, they should be looking at least the broadly available consumer tools, and probably have some fluency in how the models work behind them so they understand what they're good for. And I would say, add in, a sprinkle of other capabilities as well. Integrated tools that help content generation on platforms like LinkedIn and others, or image generation tools like Midjourney or DALL-E, and the difference between a multimodal model and something that's, fine-tuned or geared specifically for doing one task. These kind of things will help them understand which tools are applicable in which scenarios and which use cases.
Yeah, Brownie, I think you mentioned earlier too of like the barrier to entry right now is very little. We can just start creating content, creating new marketing campaigns. But the differentiator also is, how do I make it sound like me or the company or whoever's creating it, right? It's going to be a market differentiator, how you make your voice in these Gen AI contents sound like who you want it to be, sound like your company's culture and what it is. So that's going to be another piece. It's not only that technical piece, the human interactivity piece, but also how to make it part of your company culture too. So maybe somebody straight off the streets isn't going to bring that piece of it, where a little more tenured person internal, back to the training piece of it, could be a little more beneficial.
Well, and Ryan, I want to pick up on that. I mean, when you think about culture and helping people to understand what it is and how to use it, I'd love to talk a little bit with the three of you about Nigel. And Nigel, for the benefit of our audience, comes from NGL. So West Monroe has a mission to inspire the next generation of leaders. And so that N and that G and that L became Nigel, which is our own West Monroe proprietary generative AI tool. But I would love for you to talk a little bit about maybe the genesis of that. I mean, I love that it's an opportunity for us to play in a sort of safe space and to build our own skills as a company. And it's interesting to me that in a previous episode of This is Digital, we had Ali K. Miller on talking about the intersection of talent and generative AI, and that it would become an expectation of talent to have access to generative AI, which is exactly what we've done here at West Monroe. But, could you talk a little bit more about Nigel? And EJ, let's start with you.
Yeah, awesome. So I think you hit some of the major points right there. We, certainly wanted to provide ubiquitous access to a secure environment. People can leverage generative AI tools in their day-to-day work, from basic productivity to specific tasks. That's great. But we also wanted to help build a culture of learning and exchange and growth in the space as well. And that's something that we've added to our platform that we don't see in a lot of other platforms. The ability to author or engineer prompts and then share them out with the organization so other folks can take advantage of them. Maybe you're really good at prompt engineering and you've created something that's really effective in your day-to-day work. You can share that out with your peers so that they can take advantage of it and maybe provide feedback or help you upskill it or change it or modify it to do other tasks as well. So that's been really great also. I think the other thing that it's done is it's established sort of a foundation bed. We started in the AI lab here at West Monroe building some tools that would allow us to accelerate the work that we deliver to our clients. This is a tool that helps us accelerate the tools that we deliver to our employees as well. So it allows us to train internal staff on how to build and develop it. It allows us to train our employees on how to use it. And it allows us to create and integrate new solutions over time as well. Brownie or Ryan, anything else you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on this in the overview, but Rissa, you asked specifically what was the genesis of it. And I think when these LLMs first came out and we started experimenting with ChatGPT and Bard, we had a bunch of folks in the AI lab with a bunch of complex notebooks of prompts, like pages and pages of prompts. Oh, I got this really cool interaction with it, asking about healthcare data or payer coverage, right? Which led to our coverage oracle. Or someone who had a really good interaction that allowed it to generate user stories for a common product, like generate a number of user stories for core functionality in an application like Twitter or a banking application. Or we had someone that used an example of creating a production schedule, right, with a finite set of inputs. Well, there were pages of these notes that folks had independently curated that really got interesting results with these tools like ChatGPT. So we just built a portal that allowed people to share those experiences. We figured out which ones got the most traction and interest from our user community and elevate those and allow them to contribute new ideas. So it was a great way to kind of share these interactions and successes that folks have had with output using tools like ChatGPT and start offering that to the whole organization.
I went to a luncheon recently and the artist Laurie Simmons was speaking at it, and she described AI as her newest collaborator. And that's really how I see it. That I think that there is some level of fear within the marketing community of our jobs are at risk. And I don't see it that way. I really see it as this new collaborator that's going to help you get more done and get it done better. It's not just getting it done to reduce cost. I think it's also to drive top line opportunities for the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've used that example, EJ and Ryan, a few times of digital photography was going to ruin photographers, right? Well, it's done the opposite. It's given them more power, right? Because they don't have to worry about, they can start working on post-production and use tools to hone their craft and alter output far faster than they used to be able to. It's interesting.
No, I think that's right. And, I grew up in consulting where there's always been a discussion about the highest and best use of time. And I feel like this is a natural extension of that it's an opportunity to really audit time and determine what's high level, what's low level, and how can technology be better leveraged to play at the top, to play at the highest and best use of your time.
Yeah.
So we've had some internal conversations around kind of the change management aspects of we introduced a new tool. Now we expect everybody to use it every day, use it repetitively. And some of our executives say, well, I don't know how to use this. I'm not generating content. I'm double checking things, or I'm researching on if this is the right technique off of what I know in my brain. How are you implementing, how do you use this? How do you OCM this? How do you implement change management?
The change management, I think, is an interesting one. And I think that there is something really important about giving people a place to play, because I think when you have a chance to experience it, it becomes different. It can be dark and scary, but when you play around with it, you can see the magic of it. I think that that's really important. And I used it recently for a speech. And, to your point, Ryan, it was content, but it was really interesting just to play and to see, well, here's what I would have written, but what is this going to write for me? And it was different than I might have approached it. But I think that there's something really lovely about starting with a draft instead of starting with a blank piece of paper. And we also use it for conversational emails, and it's to generate meetings. And it's really interesting because you raised the comment earlier about tone of voice and, how do you think about what West Monroe's brand voice is and how it needs to show up in the marketplace. And I think it's a place it's a time to play and to learn from the experience and continue to optimize.
I'm curious, when you think about a place for a busy executive to get started, sometimes it can feel daunting to
daunting is the word. Yes.
Yeah. To dig in and say, oh, I have to use it for work to do something important. Would you say there's an entry point of maybe trying it out in a personal setting for something lower stakes, or a lower stakes business requirement before bringing it into a day-to-day workflow?
I think that's exactly right. I mean, you could think of low stakes as the generative AI functionality on LinkedIn. And that was interesting to play around with. That I was going in and tweaking my bio on LinkedIn, and it was, click here to see the suggestions. And it was interesting because I think it raises the point that you all have raised earlier of how do we think about what's authentic, or how do we think about personality? And, it was interesting to compare, what I had written with what it had written. And there is merit in both. And I think it's an interesting one of, it creates this optionality that perhaps didn't exist before, that I think can create a best of both worlds scenario.
Right on. That's awesome. Yeah, we've always said human in the loop. It's great for drafting, it's great for suggestions, and then your critical thinking and expertise help shape it into something that's actually a solid deliverable as you send it out into the world.
And I think that that's exactly right, EJ, that critical thinking becomes that much more critical. That becomes so much more important. And how do you decipher what quality is? Or, I think that's an age-old conversation around what is quality. But I think it'll take new forms, as we all become more well-versed in generative AI.
Absolutely.
I know you usually wrap the episode with what does digital mean to you, but this is the AI version of it.
Crossover.
Yeah, the crossover. So to me, I think it means for all of us at work, a lot less time on the mundane and repetitive in the future and more time spent on the problems that matter.
That's awesome. I love that. I'll go next. What does AI mean to me? It means that we have to rethink. If some of that mundane work goes away, we have to rethink the care and attention that goes into upskilling and training the next generation of leaders. If they don't cut their teeth on the repetitive, mundane tasks, what do we do to give them really great opportunities to grow and learn and leverage these tools to help them do that? So I think there's a very interesting opportunity there for coaching and training in the future.
Yeah, and to wrap it up, I think one of my favorite quotes that I've heard, I use it in almost all the discussions I have, is that AI is the worst today that it ever will be. Tomorrow it will be better, it continues to better. So looking forward to the future and getting things in place now for when we're at this brand new shiny ball that everybody wants, I think is going to be for all the success of the future when AI is really at its best. These foundational pieces today, I think, are going to be super important.
I love that, Ryan. I love that idea of AI is at its worst today.
Yep.
That is fabulous. So clearly, we want to encourage our This is Digital audience to tune into This is AI. For anybody who would like to stay in touch with you individually, where's the best place for them to do so?
You can find us all, I think, on LinkedIn, and our contact info will be in the show notes. And, please reach out to us or West Monroe if you have questions around AI or want to know how to get started. We're happy to help.
Great. Well, Eric, Ryan, EJ, thank you so much for joining today's episode of This is Digital. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for listening to This is Digital. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow or subscribe on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more information on This is Digital, visit westmonroe.com/thisisdigital.